Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting recovery story. My name is Alec, Kassin, co-founder of Pain Free Comeback. I'm joined in this special edition with a co-host this time, MindBody Medicine and Neuroplastic Medicine Pioneer, Dr. David Schechter. David, thanks for hopping on here.
Glad to help you out.
Also, we have special guest Doug, who is here to share his story of overcoming 13 years of chronic leg pain using a neuroplastic TMS approach. Doug, thanks so much for hopping on here and joining and sharing your story.
Yeah, happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So this is a really interesting recovery interview, and I love the collaborative aspect of this because you're both a patient of Dr. Schechter's and a client of mine. And I'd love just to, at a high level, Doug, if you want to share kind of your story of if you were to sum up this recovery that you've experienced in just a few paragraphs, what would you say?
Wow, it's been quite a journey to sum up 13 years of pain in a paragraph might be a little bit tough, but having read Dr. Schechter's book, Think Away Your Pain, and many other things, many of us who suffer from TMS or neuroplasticity, we've had diagnoses that were incorrect. We've gone through different procedures that really weren't appropriate, and it can be very frustrating and always trying to search for and find that answer. But I did. I was actually on, it was just a social media post mentioned Dr. Schechter's book, and it just immediately resonated with me. And all the diagnoses I'd received in the past, you come home and you research them online. It just didn't, none of them resonated with what I was experiencing. I read that book and it's almost like the light bulb went off. I knew this was me. The type T personality and many other things that were in there just seemed to fit so perfect.
Yeah.
So 13 years in, I found Dr. Schechter's book. I seeked out Dr. Schechter and meeting with him and confirming that diagnosis was really helpful because you have doubts and you're thinking, oh, this can't just be in my head, but it gave him some further clarity and confidence that this was the right diagnosis. So thank you, Dr. Schechter, for seeing me, coming across the country to see you from so far. And then, then what? I was reading everything I could find on it, but just couldn't quite figure out the path forward. And Dr. Schechter recommended using a coach. And so Alec, you came into the picture. And for me, that was the final piece of it to make it work. But so trying to keep this as close to a paragraph as I can, but 13 years, I'd go to bed at night knowing I probably wasn't going to sleep well because I had leg pain and would often wake up and take medicine second time during the night. And I can tell you now, I don't even think about it. I don't think about leg pain. I don't think about TMS. Life is good. I go to sleep every night and I'm not worried about that pain. And that was a huge worry as I was laying down to bed every night. So hallelujah.
Hallelujah, indeed. I thought back to something that you shared a few times during our sessions, and I'm paraphrasing, but this idea that I fear I'm going to be a difficult case or that I am a challenging case. And I think this is evidence that that is not true, what you just shared.
Yeah, there are many steps along the way where I said to you, Alec, I may be a project because I just wasn't getting it and wasn't having the progress as quickly as I had wanted it to.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Honestly, I was thinking about this, when you throw a rock into the water, you immediately see the ripples. And this process is like throwing the rock and not being able to see the ripples. And you don't really sure if you're doing the right things or not. And then all of a sudden you have a breakthrough and you sleep through the night with no pain. So
I think a lot of people can relate to that. And
Alec, if I could briefly jump in. I mean, Doug has already mentioned some things that are really important for the listeners. First of all, the medical system and how it really failed him for 13 years of pain, how it approached him in a very conventional method with pain medications, injections, physical therapy and the like, which if they worked fine, but they didn't, and they kept doing the same thing over and over again. And we know what that leads to. The second thing would be Doug's openness. When he finally saw a posting on social media about a book, he was curious, he was open, he was willing to explore that. The fact that it was almost an opportunistic exploration or finding. We wish that this was so much more readily available, and that's why Alec is putting in the time and effort to make these videos so more people can see them, because it took Doug almost luck to find out about this approach. And then again, his willingness to travel to see me. He's actually not in California, had to travel to see me in California. And the willingness again, speaks to his own readiness to change, readiness to heal, willingness and openness to heal. So those are some of the key principles that he's already brought up. The miraculous recovery, I would say, while not routine, because I don't want to make it seem like it's nothing. I mean, we've had so many thousands of cases of that in my career. It's wonderful. It's exciting to hear. But you see how the steps that build up to that are also important.
Well said. And I'm curious, David, from your perspective, like how many people do you see who, obviously the details are different, right? Everybody has their own unique backstory and what brings them in the door. But one of the things that I see a lot is people believe, oh, I'm different somehow. And so how often do you see that in your practice, and how unique is Doug's situation in that he came to you being like, this is me, I'm all in?
Well, in my practice, it's not that uncommon that people have read either my book or one of the other books in the field and are at the point where they're ready to say, this resonates with me. I need your help in making sure I'm doing the correct diagnosis. And I need your help in directing me to a treatment plan or a collaborative team to get better. So I'm actually more used to that than most physicians because of the kind of practice I have. I mean, there's some people who come to me and have no idea at all. There was a man yesterday who came to me, had no idea at all that he might be a candidate for this. But after talking to and examining him, I gave him one of my bookmarks. And I said, hey, I've written several books. This is the book I would advise you to read while you're doing these other things we discussed. And I'm hoping to see him in a few weeks, and that maybe he's read the book or looked at the book and maybe he's ready to go forward in a different direction. But, you have to plant a seed sometimes. With Doug, it was easier because here was a guy, a former college basketball player, a former marathon runner, really had lost his athletic life. Oh, he kept pushing through. He's told us that he kept doing things even though they hurt, but he was miserable. He was not sleeping well. And he was willing to travel to another state, as many of my patients have, because there unfortunately are not physicians in every state or every city or every locale who have the expertise in this area. I'd like there to be. I hope we can train more and more of them. Hope some of them are listening to this video program and get interested. But, the willingness to come, the willingness to travel, the time and expense to come to California and then to be examined, to have a detailed consultation, to leave with a diagnosis and a treatment plan was crucial.
Mm. Yeah. Doug, what was it about reading David's book? And I think we have a photo that can put up here of both of David's books. You read Think Away Your Pain, I believe it was, correct?
Yes.
What was it about that struck you, and that you said to yourself, I'm willing to go to California to see this doctor?
Honestly, the most obvious thing to me was when it listed the attributes of the type T personality. I honestly, I went through that and it was just check, check, check the whole way through. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me. It just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, finally, this makes sense.
Mm.
So we should review that type T personality for the audience a little bit. So that the concept of personality characteristics were first delineated by Dr. Sarno, almost 50 years ago in his writings. He passed them on to me. And, I realized that we had a constellation of personality characteristics that we could call type T. There's a type A that's associated with heart disease. There's a type B who's the mellow surfer dude. And I decided to call it type T for tension or type T for TMS. So the characteristics include being extremely self-critical or hard on yourself, which is almost all the people I see with chronic pain who have this diagnosis have that characteristic. Another one is being very highly responsible for themselves, responsible for others, especially responsible for everything around them. Perfectionism is not uncommon, and it comes out in different forms, and it's often a tense kind of perfectionism rather than a perfectionism that leads an artist to feel like, the work is perfect now. I can finish. Goodism is something Dr. Sarno talked about. It's hard enough to change ourselves. It's really, really hard to change the world. And you can get very, very frustrated if you're someone who focuses on changing the world and doesn't understand that that is an incremental process that can take decades, that can take tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people to do it. So those are some of the characteristics that are part of the type T personality. Self-criticism, perfectionism, goodism, highly responsible for others. And Doug or Alec, can you think of any others that have applied to you or to some of your clients or patients?
Doug, any gaps that you found there?
No, I think you just described me to a T. And,
To a T, type T personality.
yeah, there you go. Well, and it's funny because, I was so focused on learning through the book and through the two of you so that I could overcome fear and overcome the pain. But it's actually, you realize that you have to check all areas of your life because this personality impacts other areas. And so honestly, if I'm following the GPS in my car somewhere I don't know where I'm going, if I miss a turn, I would just kill myself for how could I possibly miss that turn? And so I'm getting a little bit better at just driving down the road, doing a UE and getting back on track. So without
Yeah, so that brings up 2 points. You don't have to totally transform your personality to get better, even if that were possible. I'm not sure you could do it, but you don't have to do it. Slight adjustments, dialing it down a little bit, I say, is a good thing. The second thing is, why is this personality problematic? Because many successful, ambitious people have this personality. And this personality, to some degree, is connected to doing a good job and being a good spouse and being a responsible worker or business owner. But it puts a lot of pressure on ourselves. And pressure is what drives some of these physical symptoms like back pain, leg pain, headaches, migraines, pelvic pain, etc. And so it's the pressure from the type T personality that is the problem. It's not being a good person or being a responsible person or trying to change the world in a positive way. It's the pressure we put on ourselves. And Doug said, hey, it's not worth putting pressure on myself because I missed the GPS right turn signal. It's not worth it. So he just, hey, I'll make a UE and I'll get back on it. Right. It's not worth pressuring myself about that.
Well, and the other thing I'd add is, there's just an awareness that comes about on this journey from reading the book and talking to the two of you. There's just an awareness that you can't hide from. And when you're driving down the road and you're getting upset about missing that turn, you're just aware of these things more. And so it's not like it's moving a rock up a mountain to make some of these adjustments and changes. You just become aware of it and you kind of catch yourself and say, that's part of that personality trait that I didn't realize I had that's now kind of crystallized in my mind from reading the book and going through this process.
And that key word that you mentioned is awareness. Like so often, I think people who are stuck in part because they haven't developed that awareness to be able to see the role that they're playing in their symptom generation. It's like, well, I have to do things this way, or I have to put this pressure on myself, and not quite realizing like, oh, I have a choice here. And I think everything that you mentioned, Doug, is like, oh, I'm giving myself a choice. It's not an automatic, A leads to B type situation where I have to be hard on myself. So it's like holding a hot iron. It's like, as soon as you're aware of like holding a hot iron, like the action just flows. It's clear action is to just ungrip your hand and let go of the hot iron.
That's right.
So let's rewind the clock just a little bit before we dive into your healing journey. For 13 years, what are all the things that you tried in order to get rid of this leg pain?
I've tried I went through multiple epidural injections. I tried the platelet-rich plasma, PRP treatments. I tried chiropractic. My family doctor had me try medical marijuana to deal with the pain. I've gone through numerous physical therapy sessions. When I say sessions, 8 weeks is a session. So I've gone through 8 weeks of physical therapy multiple times. I've tried ice heat. I've tried an electric stim machine on my legs, on my back. I even bought an inversion table to decompress the spine because a lot of doctors thought this was coming from the spine. I'm sure there's a lot more out there, other things that I've tried that I'm just not thinking of right now, but those are.
Did you have a clear diagnosis at any point, or did people tend to shift their diagnoses or suggest other options?
Most of it settled around, it must be coming from my back, but I had a number, I mean, just a list of them, the radiculopathy, am I saying that right? Was back-centric, restless leg syndrome, rheumatoid arthritis, I was told, muscle disease, spinal stenosis. There's just a lot of explanations, none of which seem to make sense to me.
Yeah, the fact that there were multiple explanations, of course, makes it more clear that there wasn't a clear diagnosis for you. And certainly when you came to my office, I believe you brought imaging or reports, because I always try to do my due diligence with every patient and make sure they don't have a structural or biochemical problem. Because I mean, obviously there are people who have that. I'm not saying that everyone has this condition we call TMS or neuroplastic symptoms. But with Doug's case, he had tried all the conventional treatments, really not everything was as clear. And then when I looked over his imaging, I said, I don't think this really provides the evidence for a structural problem. I think we can go in a different direction with this. So I think that's very important. Also, think about the money that Doug spent. Some of it may be by his health insurance, but that's not, PRP is not covered by health insurance. So that's a bunch of thousands of dollars, if not 5 or 10 by the time you do 2 or 3 of those. And then physical therapy is covered, but you have co-pays, deductibles. So there's a tremendous cost, not only in 13 years in time, but also in money for a patient who suffers from chronic pain and doesn't get an effective program. And so I just wanted to point that out in addition to everything else to people to be aware of.
Yeah, it's really, I think that's a great point, David. I was reflecting on Michael Porter Jr., the basketball player who had his recovery story, and he's making $180 million. He has access to the best sports medicine physicians in the world, best physicians. Well, aside from you, because you went on the staff, would have gotten better a lot quicker. But it's like all the physical treatments, didn't help. And what is it that helps them? It's a neuroplastic approach, which anybody can do at essentially any level. Reading a book or doing a program. So, I'm curious. Sorry, did you have something you wanted to add there, David?
No, I think I would just say that, it's about matching the correct treatment to the correct patient, the correct diagnosis. And for Michael Porter Jr., he was being treated with the presumption that there was something structurally that continued to be the problem. Remember, athletes can get injured, but injuries heal. And even if they have surgery for an injury, that should heal. When people continue to have symptoms, and you and I can think of many athletes that this applies to, although we're not going to mention names without having examined them and diagnosed them, that at some point, the problem really becomes more of this condition we call TMS or neuroplastic, where it's stuck in their nervous system. It's no longer a structural problem. So you can start out with an injury, and many of these athletes do. They play a physical sport, but why does their injury last a year and a half and someone else gets better in 3 months? It may be because symptoms are stuck in the nervous system because of other issues that we'll go on to later. And again, with Doug, he just didn't have the correct diagnosis. And when he found it on his own and sought me out, he realized that something else resonated with him. Something else made a lot more sense. And these other physical treatments had not worked. If 2 months of physical therapy had worked, Doug and I would have never met, and I would have been seeing some other patients instead. And that's fine. I hope everybody gets better with 2 months of physical therapy, because that's a simple approach and it has a defined treatment interval. But if you don't get better with a physical approach, you do have to think about what else could be going on here.
Yeah, I have to applaud you both for being in this space in medicine, because I feel like in some aspect here, you're swimming upstream against the mainstream. And I'm so glad that you are.
Thanks for sharing that. Doug, how did your symptoms start? You want to share that with the audience?
So 13 years ago, I started having leg pain and I didn't really understand why. Um, and how they started is a question. One of the things in our coaching sessions we determined just by accident was that my mother-in-law and my father-in-law were in a terrible car accident and they were both killed in the car accident. And I never put two and two together, but that was 13 years ago. And so there was a lot on me. I was already in a pretty demanding career, raising kids and coaching them in every youth sport that they played, um, board chair of a nonprofit. And all of a sudden this happened and, I had to lead the family through it, which was some tough emotions. Even talking about right now, it's a tough memory for me. So, Alec, you made that connection for me. So I guess I'll have to answer that apparently was part of what triggered all this in the first place.
And Doug, if I recall, when you came to me, your symptoms had a pattern that wasn't a kind of a typical structural pattern. I think your symptoms were much worse one time of the day. Isn't that true?
Yeah, my pain was leg pain at night exclusively. I didn't have pain at all during the day, but at nighttime, I'd get very anxious about putting my head on the pillow because I knew it was coming.
And patterns of pain that are temporal like that, some people will say, I only get pain at 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 6 o'clock. Well, that doesn't quite sound structural, right? That sounds more nervous system based. Doug had a lot of fear associated with his pain. It was affecting his sleep, and it happened typically at night. But he was sometimes very active during the daytime because Doug didn't stop doing all of his activities. And he, during his business career and his raising his kids, he was active doing various things and didn't have that much pain during the day, or sometimes not at all. And then it hit him at night. So again, these kind of discrepant patterns provide evidence for a neuroplastic diagnosis rather than a structural diagnosis. And this is something that you have to take a careful history to really determine.
Very good point. And Doug, once you had that diagnosis, once you read David's book, I'm curious, did you see an immediate shift in your symptoms, or what happened in the immediate aftermath of that?
So I read the book and I saw Dr. Schechter and he confirmed the diagnosis. So I'm like, okay, I got this. I consider myself a pretty confident, capable person. And I'm like, I know what it is now. I can just deal with this. But I didn't really have success with it. And what I found was I would start reading other things on the internet or other books. And one book would say this, and I'd go down that path. Another book would say this, I go down that path in terms of things to try. And I just needed like a roadmap, and I was all over the place, and I was not having the success that I was hoping to have initially.
What you mentioned, I think, is so important, that your confidence came before your results. So often people want this confirmation of, okay, well, I read the book. If I'm not getting better, then it must not work. But what you just said there is like, I need a roadmap to follow, and I have all these influences that are muddying the waters of this idea, and that can be so common, right? Somebody has a session with a physician or a coach or a practitioner, or they see something online, it resonates with them, they have this spark, and then they read something on Instagram or Facebook or in the news that just kind of takes them back into that place of feeling disempowered, that structural idea.
Yeah.
So I love how your confidence preceded the results that you then later got.
Yeah, I mean, Doug,
go ahead.
Keep going, Doug.
I was just going to say that I think confidence plays a big role in this, and I think Dr. Schechter talked about it in the book a little bit. And because of that, I had that confidence of the diagnosis from going there, and just the innate reading the book and knowing, oh my gosh, this is me. But I took it one step further. My wife has lived this journey with me, all these different treatments, all these different diagnoses, and nothing worked. So she's become pretty skeptical about new ideas for my pain. So I came home and said, look, this is it. I'm convinced. and I need no doubters in the house. So you may be skeptical, but you just can't show it with me because I'm working through this and I need to maintain my confidence. There were times where I'm like, doubting myself a little bit, but I would come right back to the facts that I read in the books and the facts of the diagnosis to maintain that confidence.
Yeah, I mean, I remember doing a couple of video follow-ups with Doug, and there were some things that had improved, but he still had a lot of fear about going to sleep,
Yeah.
right? And you had reduced your medication use, but you were still using a little bit of that tramadol painkiller at nighttime, and had almost a psychological addiction, not a physical addiction, but psychologically needed that
Agreed.
medication. And you had made some progress, but that's when I said, Doug, we need to involve either a psychotherapist or a coach. And I said, I know a perfect coach for you because he's also a guy who's been involved with athletics like you were your whole life, and the college athlete like, of course, you were. And that he has a good system, a good program. He's patient, and he'll work with you week by week, which is something that's harder to do with a physician who has other patients to see or is higher cost or whatever. And so I referred him to Alec. And I think that's when you really also began to really address those fears, those worries, and the nighttime pain cycle.
Yes, for sure. I was looking for kind of the structure for the approach to get me from point A to point B where I wanted to get to. And so Alec and I talked about that, and he early on said, just so we're clear, we're in this together. It's not that I have all the answers, but we're going to, work through this together. And it became very much of a partnership, very collaborative. We would talk through things and he would suggest ideas from his great base of knowledge that he has in this area. And it worked. And it didn't take long once we started working together to start seeing improvement and ultimately for me to be completely resolved on symptoms.
Resolved on symptoms, at sleeping better, and off of medications, right? All the three.
Well, you mentioned tramadol. I view myself as a kind of a wellness guy. I run, I bike, I sail, I scuba dive, I kayak, I snow ski, I water ski. Like for me, being outdoors and active is how I'm wired. And the idea that I was having to take a pretty strong pain medication, tramadol, just sat so wrong with me. But I tried repeatedly to just stop taking it, and I couldn't do it for a long time.
I would we got into this cycle once you started to see these results, Doug. I remember you would text me. It's like the NP, no pills, no pain. Like how many nights in a row, how many weeks in a row. And
right.
It was so cool to see that. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that deconditioning process, because one thing that I think was really fascinating was, and David alluded to this, was this kind of psychological idea about the medication itself. And I think you had maybe the first crack in that idea, at least from my perspective as a coach, was I think you had a night where you were 99% sure you had forgotten to take the tramadol, and you ended up not having pain that night, or your pain was significantly reduced. So talk a little bit about that kind of chink in the armor.
Yeah. So as we all know, success breeds success. And I never forget to take that medicine at night because I know what nighttime is like of leg pain when I don't take the medicine. But somehow I forgot in the middle of this process, I forgot to take it. And I woke up the next day. I'm like, I slept through the night and I didn't take anything, which then further cements in your mind and builds that confidence like, oh, this is just proof that this is TMS. And so I'm going to give you my analogy on all this. I refer to it as the cake mix. When you make a cake, you have to have the right proportions and the right ingredients for it to come out and taste good. And for me, the cake mix for me on TMS was, it started with the biggest ingredients, the flour. The flour for me was reading the book, going and getting that diagnosis from Dr. Schechter, and going through the coaching. That's the biggest ingredient. That was the biggest part of my success story. The sugar, if you don't have any sugar, that cake doesn't taste too good. And for me, the sugar was journaling. And Alec challenged me to journal through some really difficult emotions, not just the in-laws passing away and the tragic accident, but there were other things too that came up that I had to kind of journal through and deal with those emotions. I wasn't too big on journaling, but it really was impactful, and I took it seriously. So that was the sugar in the cake. And then kind of the icing on the cake was because the pain was at night, it was the nighttime meditations that I would do, where before bed, I would do a meditation. I'd talk to myself and say, look, focus on the facts here. We know this is all in my mind. And, some nights work better than others, but eventually that took over and I'm pain-free.
That's well put. Thank you.
Yeah. I love that analogy. And it's unique too, because everybody likes different types of cake. And there's no two recoveries that are the same. So many people, maybe folks that are watching this right now, might think, oh, well, if journaling works for Doug, I need to now journal. And I see that all the time. For everybody who had journaling be a really important part of their recovery, there are folks for whom that was less important. But what I really liked about your process, Doug, was you found things that worked for you. Like, you were willing to try things, but you were also willing to adapt, take them on. Even if there was some skepticism, you leaned in. And even like you said, with the journaling, even if it wasn't something that, you were super, super fond of, you saw the benefit in it and being able to release some of those emotions.
Yeah. And they were very successful. Like, I was pretty skeptical about journaling my feelings, but I worked through some really tough stuff, which brought tears to my eyes as I was doing it. But it brought things out that I hadn't really dealt with or thought about. And so it was really beneficial.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's deepening of awareness, right? Like, if how many physicians are talking to their patients about, what's going on in your life when these symptoms started, and what are some of the emotions that are associated with that. Like, it's when you see this new lens, it's kind of like going from seeing the world in 2D to 3D almost. It's quite remarkable what the changes that can make, even if they defy what seems quote unquote logical.
Yeah. I'm a runner, and I celebrated turning 60 by running the New York City Marathon. There weren't a ton of 60-year-olds out there. So, but I did all my running in the morning because I wanted as much time as possible in the day for my legs to settle down, to have a chance of sleeping at night. And Dr. Schechter challenged me, throw that brain off and just run at different times of the day. And early on, I was struggling with that a little bit, but he was right. And, my family was visiting me, and we did like a holiday 5K together that the start time was 7:30 at night, and slept like a baby that day. So,
so you brought up a lot of key concepts, right? I mean, changing patterns can be very effective, right? Our nervous system gets stuck in a particular way of doing things, and there's a kind of a fear and an anxiety associated with changing it, but you were willing to run that evening 5K and sleep well after that. You also talked, repeatedly about confidence and belief in the diagnosis, and that's a principle that I emphasize. It's one of my core stages of healing that I talk about in the book and elsewhere. And then you mentioned journaling as the sugar on the cake. Most cakes have sugar. If we can use different flours, but most cakes have sugar. And I do believe in expressive writing. There's lots of ways of doing it. I've written a couple of guided workbooks that help people to journal. There's lots of ways to journal. And really, I don't mind if people use different techniques, but it can be a very effective tool. But you've got to have that belief in the diagnosis and continue to work on that, to fight the doubts. A lot of my follow-up visits tend to be people saying, I doubt I've got this because of X, Y, and Z. And I'm having to address those individual doubts very carefully and very precisely, because if you've got doubt, is like a cancer wearing away at the success of this. And so we really have to work on that. But Doug had a strong belief from the beginning, and was willing to try things with a little bit of coaxing. And that's what a great coach is like Alex, is he can coax. Coaches get the best out of you without you feeling like you're being beaten up too badly.
Yeah. He definitely
hopefully I didn't beat you up too badly.
Yeah.
The piece, David, that you just mentioned that I want to connect to Doug's story is like doubt, right? If you are not 100% confident, in this diagnosis, or have the availability to be, when you get back to your favorite activities and inevitably there are symptoms, the doubt can crush your progress pretty quickly. And one of the things, Doug, that I admired about you is this systematic approach of, even if you got symptoms when you were running, you were willing to try again either the next day or in a few days to and test out and retrain your brain, and take leadership over your system. I'm curious if you can share with the watchers here what your process was as getting back to running and not having leg pain at night on those nights.
Well, I should first say that my leg pain at night was always worse on days that I was active. So I'll run usually 3 times a week, and those nights were the worst. And so Alec challenged me and said, you know, we agree that this is all coming from your brain. So it shouldn't be that way. So he challenged me to drop down to, he said, what's easy? Is a mile easy? I'm like, my gosh, that's not even a run, a mile, like it's nothing. So I ran a mile and thought, oh, I have no problem sleeping tonight. Worst night of my life. I literally took tramadol when I went to bed. I woke up 2 more times and took a little bit more tramadol each time. And talked to Alec afterward, and he's like, well, clearly a mile is nothing for your body. So it's got to be coming from, your brain. And so then I tried it 2 days later and had no problems. But I went through, I can't recall the terminology, Alec, you can jump in and tell me what this is, but I went through this cycle several times where after the mile, I went to 2 miles, bad night again. And then a couple days later, I tried 2 miles again, good night. And then we went to 2.5 miles. And honestly, at 3 miles in my head was like, on a short run day, this might be a run I typically do. So that kind of messed me up, and I was back in pain, and I had to drop back even for a week to 2.5 miles, which I could sleep through the night again. And then I kept at it, and then I realized, okay, I can do 3 miles until I was running 5+ and no pain.
Yeah. And so, this, we have to emphasize to the audience, this is real pain that Doug is feeling and that other people with this condition is feeling. When he says it's a brain, that's the brain is the ultimate cause and the ultimate processing location of all sensations in the body, including pain. And when we find evidence, and Alec is very good at helping to build up evidence in the patient's mind in the recovery of the process, is if you build up confidence, you build up evidence that it can't be a structural problem. The pattern is not logical. It's illogical, right? You see, it hurts more with two miles than it does with 1 mile, and 1 mile hurts more. It doesn't make sense, right? It's like 1 mile was nothing for him, and yet that was his worst night. So lack of clear patterns, temporal patterns that don't make sense, and build up the evidence. And that's how Alec kind of broke away at the barriers that Doug had over time.
And it took Doug to be able to recognize, like, I know that this is my brain. I know that I'm actively retraining it. And what I sometimes see with folks is this idea of they're responding to the symptoms as opposed to retraining their system, right? You can do what you were describing, Doug, graded exposure is the term, right? Of slowly getting back to normal levels of activity. And you can view that as in one of 2 ways. One is, I might have symptoms and I'm going to be the leader of my brain and my nervous system and show it that I am okay, that this is safe, that we can do this, versus, oh, I'm going to go out and test and see what my body can do. Like, one is a very neuroplastic idea that, the brain, the nervous system are malleable. The other is very biomedical, right? Oh, I'm going to go out and test my leg and see how it feels. And if it hurts, then I'm going to back off. If I'm feeling good, then I'm going to go further. And so it can be very counterintuitive, right, to everything that we've heard from the medical system, trainers, coaches, etc. And we all kind of want this sense of being able to get back to physical activity after the symptoms go away, right? So to be able to do this stuff pain-free or symptom-free, oftentimes it involves us doing our favorite activities with some symptoms in order to unlock being able to do them pain-free.
A concept that kind of was addressed just briefly was the concept of checking in. So people with chronic pain tend to check in a lot on their pain, right? Like Doug, probably before bedtime, you're going, do I have pain? Is my leg
Yeah.
hurting? So what I try to really encourage people to do is check in emotionally, check in psychologically, don't check in physically. If you noticing yourself first thing in the morning or last thing at night, do I have back pain? Do I have pelvic pain? Do I have leg pain? You're probably doing the wrong thing. Check in on, hey, how do I feel? How do I feel about tomorrow? How do I feel about today? What am I upset about? What am I angry about? That's really the more effective way. It really is it's a modern take on Sarno's concept. Think psychologically, not physically, in order to get better from real physical pain.
Yeah, I was guilty as charged on what you just said. I mean, my pain was always at night, but even during the day, I'm thinking, okay, that was a hard run. Am I starting to feel anything? And then at nighttime, it was times 100. I was just my mind would just be going crazy. Now,
Checking in.
now if my legs are feeling tired around dinner time, where before I'd be like, oh, it's gonna be a bad night. I'm just like, that doesn't even matter.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Nice.
I will say, and when the mention from you brought something up earlier, Dr. Schechter, there's an awareness that I gained around the nervous system, what's going on in the nervous system. And as I was going through the process, I don't really think about it as much anymore. But as I was going through the process, if my nervous system is like really wound up, wired because of what I'm in the midst of doing, something stressful, whatever, my earlier self would have just powered through that without awareness. But now I'm like, okay, settle down, life's short. And I think just that awareness to allow yourself to keep your nervous system in check and let it calm down a little bit was a great lesson for me to learn.
It's a great lesson. Take a few deep breaths or just slow down a little bit or listen to some music or do a 2-minute meditation or whatever.
Yeah.
I'd love to teach that at the school level. Wouldn't that have been great if we had learned that in high school or junior high school and people been able to incorporate that our whole lives? We'd all be a lot more chill people and healthier.
That's so
But we're taught a lot of other things in school, but unfortunately not that.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah. I'm curious, that leads into this idea of how your recovery has impacted other areas of your life. So I know one of the concepts that we talked about in our later sessions was this idea of The Upside of Stress, the book by Kelly McGonigal, and kind of a different way to interpret stress. And I'm just curious, based on your recovery, what changes have you noticed outside of just, hey, my symptoms are gone?
Honestly, the biggest one, I wish my wife was here. She's out shopping, but we've been married for 38 years. And, when you don't get a good night's sleep, you generally are a little bit cranky. And there's a lot of that going on in my life where I wake up tired and cranky / angry. So I've become a better husband. I think she would tell you that I'm a happier guy because the pain was real, as you said, Dr. Schechter. I mean, it hurt. But you layer on that frustration of not lack of sleep, you layer on a frustration of not even knowing what is causing this. We always want to know those things. And I just had so many diagnoses that weren't right. And you just didn't know. So there's a lot of frustration around it. Of course, all that's cleared up. And I'm a happier guy and sleeping good and enjoying life a lot more.
Well, that's a great bonus to be able to not only feel better, but to feel like your relationship is better and and you're happier. So that's a wonderful side effect of getting better with this approach that involves insight and awareness, right? If I had cured you with a pill, I mean, you'd be less cranky, but I don't think you would have had the insight or awareness that you get from this, right? So that's the wonderful thing about this approach.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, very holistic.
The whole thing for me is it's a little like that old adage about learning to ride a bike. When you're a little kid, you learn to ride a bike. It seems impossible trying to balance yourself on this thing, and then once you get it, it's just so easy. It's the easiest thing that you've ever done. And I don't want to oversimplify this for other patients that you're working with, because this was a huge challenge. It was 13 years of waking up at night in pain. And even once I read the book and thought this was me, just working through that process was really challenging. I got frustrated with myself for not having more progress now that I knew what it was more quickly. But as hard as that was, again, I'll bring it back to riding a bike. Now I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it, and I'm successfully sleeping and enjoying my life.
Like, how many months was it since between when you came to my office in July and when you would say you were cured or healed?
I came to, in July of 25 is when I came to your office. And I think we did a couple of monthly follow-ups before you suggested bringing Alec into the mix. And then till I got started with Alec might have been, what do you think?
Mid-August.
What was it?
Mid-August.
Mid-August.
Or end of,
Okay.
2020.
Yeah. And I would say we were having success early December and maybe by mid-December. Actually,
So my point is, you had 13 years of, was it 13 or 18 years? 13 years
13.
of pain. And in
13.
5 months or less, you were essentially completely recovered. So, there's ups and downs in the process of healing. Just like you mentioned, learning a bike. I mean, unless you catch the kid, he's going to fall a few times in the course of learning how to bike. Often the parent runs beside and catches him before he falls. But the point is that process of retraining the nervous system at any age, even at that malleable age of 6 or 7 or 5 that a kid learns to bike at, is not that easy. It's not that easy to train the nervous system. But once you train it, as you said, then the child can balance himself and ride effectively for the rest of his life. But with you, you had to you had a certain nervous system, and you had to kind of throw it out of balance and get it back into balance. And it took only 4 or 5 months to relieve 13 years of pain. And, obviously you would have preferred to be 1 month. I would have preferred to be 2 weeks, but I have no expectations that anybody's going to get better in any particular time frame. People ask me all the time, how long will it take? And I tell them it'll take as long as it takes. It takes a different amount of time for different people. It has nothing to do with your effort or your intelligence. It's just a matter of being patient and persistent, trying different things until something really clicks. The ups and downs of improving, I call it. But if you really think about it, 4 or 5 months, that involved no injections, no epidurals, no toxic medications. In fact, we got you off of toxic medication. It involved nothing other than talking and learning, and the process of having to change how you think about things and how you approach things and process some emotions with journaling. And so it's really an amazing thing that in 4 or 5 months, you had such a full recovery. And, now several months later, you're just going about your life and living your life and not even thinking about this, other than being kind enough to come on this recording today.
Yeah. I think the last time I took any tramadol was November 4th, I think was the last time I took it. So it's been like 3 months. And honestly, I used to sleep with tramadol and water next to the bed so that if it was a bad night, I could take some more. I don't even know where the tramadol is.
So from July to tramadol was 4 months. From July to tramadol to ending tramadol was less than 4 months. So that's really fantastic for you, for your body, for your liver, for your kidneys, for everything else. And your marriage, as you've mentioned. So a lot of benefits came along. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful to hear. And couldn't happen to a nicer guy as well.
Well, thank you very much. I'm 64. I told you I ran New York City Marathon at age 60. I'm thinking London at 65, another year.
All right.
Yeah. No reason why you can't. Look forward to seeing as we start to wrap this up. I think you mentioned your age there, being 64. I think your recovery, Doug, shows how you can recover from this at any age. And, David, I know you've seen people at all spectrum of all different ages of patients in your clinic get better. And I think going back to that bike analogy, Doug, if you had said, well, this is like riding a bike, but I'm too old to ride a bike or to learn to ride a bike, or I can't change, or I'm not going to do this, you'd have ended up in the same place. But what was required from you was to say, all right, this is hard. It looks challenging, and I'm going to give it my all. I'm going to keep going even when it looks bleak or looks challenging, or I have doubts. And here you are. So I think it's just a testament to no matter how long you have been struggling with neuroplastic symptoms, whether they're diagnosed or undiagnosed, regardless of what age you are, there's hope.
Yeah, I think persistence and determination. You got to keep going.
Yeah,
That's a good phrase for the recording. And Doug's a young 64 and very active, but I've treated people from teenage years into their 70s and 80s as well, and had success. So absolutely, it can, it's better to learn it earlier. Alec and I were fortunate. I learned it at 21 or so from Dr. Sarno, who helped me with the pain, as well as teaching me this approach. And Alec learned it in his 20s. It's better to learn it earlier because you get to apply it for more of your life. But regardless of when you learn it, you have a lot of years left, hopefully, to benefit from this approach and sleep better and communicate better and feel better.
it's like the best time to plant a tree, right?
Yeah.
Best time 20 years ago. Second best time today.
That's right.
Trust me, there's been so many times I'm like, why did I not know about this earlier?
Well, by coming on this recording, you're helping others hopefully to hear about this so that they can get to it at the right time for them, which may be earlier and may not be, but hopefully they can get it earlier too.
If I impact one person, I'd be thrilled because it's just changed my life.
What would you say to people who are watching this who are maybe where you were 6 months ago? If you were to speak directly to them, what would you say? What advice would you have?
It's part of that cake mix stuff. Read the book, read Think Away Your Pain, go see Dr. Schechter, sign up with Alec. There is hope. I mean, there's hope to get out of pain. And I didn't understand this before. I didn't know what was causing it. But there's hope to get out of pain, and you can get there.
Well said. Well said. All right. Anybody have any last words? Anything to share?
I'm just thank you, Alec, for putting this together. And it's great to have the three of us on the same screen. We've never been in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
Doug and I have been in the same place, and Alec and I have been in the same place, but the three of us have never been on the same place. And yet we've been able to help help Doug to recover. And we've been able to get together to communicate this to the outside world.
From my perspective, regardless of whether someone's watching this or not, I just want you both to know, and I know I've told you this before, but you absolutely changed my life. It's a true statement. It's just 13 years of this, and now I have none of it. So thank you, Dr. Schechter. Thank you, Alec. I'm forever grateful.
That's why we do the work. And
You're very
thank you
welcome.
for being an amazing client too.
Thank you.
Awesome. All righty. Well, thank you both. Doug, thank you for sharing your story, being so open and vulnerable. This
Sure.
is going to help a lot of people. David, your expertise as always is just so needed in this space. And thank you for providing the commentary. And looking forward to seeing what's to come. London Marathon, age 65.
I
And
hope so.
we'll to the listeners and the watchers, we will see you again soon. Take care, everybody.